Good morning and welcome to the Employability Skills Series, where we explore the top skills employers are looking for in candidates. Each week, we will cover a different topic with thoughts and insights from professionals in a variety of industries. I'm your host, Watson-Morrow, Senior Associate Director of Experiential Learning and Employer Relations. Today, I have David Aranda, Director of FSC Counseling Center, as my guest, and we'll be discussing the importance of accepting consequences and embracing mistakes in the workplace. David has been at Florida Southern Counseling Center for the past 4.5 years, including as director for the last 3.5. He obtained a master's of social work at the University of Central Florida and became licensed as a clinical social worker. He's been practicing mental health counseling and social work for 20 years. He's lived in Lakeland since 2001 with his wife and 2 children. Good morning, David. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Morning. Thanks for having me again.
Yes, thank you so much. And I was actually looking back and we had the same topic last time as well.
Yeah,
So I know I just read your introduction, but tell us a little bit more about yourself and then we'll kind of dive into this topic.
sure. So good morning. My role right now, my position is executive director of health services. So I oversee both the counseling center and the student health center as well. Yeah, I've lived in Lakeland for 20 years, worked in the mental health field for 20 years. And I love it. Wouldn't do anything else even if I could. And yeah, I love having these events where I can just chat and talk about really important things.
Yeah, I do too. And this one is really kind of near and dear to my heart, not just as an educator, but also as a mother, teaching and raising my own children, but being able to kind of understand that we're going to screw up. I had a great example yesterday. My child made some unwise choices at school. I actually got a call from the school. It wasn't anything super bad or malicious. He just made a really poor decision. And he was really beat up about it. And I knew he was consequencing himself more than I could ever. But, just letting him know, like, hey, this is okay. You have to understand, the consequence was that he's not allowed to do the pledge anymore because he said some things which he thought the intercom was off and it wasn't, and it went over the entire school. But that was a great learning moment for him. And so this is a great topic to start with. So I just want to kind of get your thoughts on this, like about like embracing mistakes and accepting consequences.
Yeah, and here I'm gonna fix my, there you go, glare from the sunlight. Um, yeah, I mean, I always start this conversation with anyone with the fact that you need to accept that you're going to make mistakes, and how you being able to accept it and then how you view it makes the world of difference in everything, not just career wise, not just work related, but relationships, schooling, everything. You're going to make mistakes, and the what we call growth mindset helps in terms of viewing mistakes as part of learning. You need to make mistakes to learn. Um, there's no way that you can get to be the best version at whatever it is you're doing without making mistakes along the way. So, it's a fact that mistakes are as important as successes, because that's how you get to where you want to get. So that's the first thing, is being able to accept that you're going to make them. You're going to be wrong sometimes, and that it it doesn't feel good. It never does, right? But
Right.
there's a lot of benefit that can come from it, and being able to understand that and accept that then helps kind of everything else, because it trickles down to everything else in terms of decisions. So that's the first part, is kind of having that mindset, growth mentality, and accepting that that's going to happen, and accepting the benefits that will come from it. And then the other part is accepting consequences. When you mess up, you own up, you know. And I just made that up, although that sounds kind of catchy, right?
I like
Um,
it.
you own up when you make a mistake. And again, if you're able to view mistakes as part of the whole process, and not indicative of who you are, right? Because sometimes the challenges kind of come into place when where you view mistakes, you let mistakes kind of translate into you. Mistakes don't define you. right?
Mhm.
So when you make a mistake and that translates into, well, I'm a failure, right? That's one of the we call that a thinking trap, is when you make a mistake that you automatically turn that into I'm a failure. Well, that's not true. And that's where you kind of get in trouble if you take that kind of mindset. So owning up to the fact that, hey, I messed up. And not just with words, right? But
Mhm.
with actions. Um, as a colleague and as a supervisor, I don't really worry or hone in on your mistakes. I pay attention to what happens after. I want
Okay.
to, obviously I want to hear you say, I'm sorry. Sure.
Mhm.
That helps and accept consequences, but I also want to see what you're going to do after as part of the process to not make that mistake again. And it may happen again, but I want to see what you're doing. Do you make the same mistake over and over because you keep doing the same thing over and over? And then that's the message sent with that is, well, you're not really trying. You're not really sorry. Or are you making the mistake a couple of times, but I see you trying different things. I see you learning and adjusting. And just sometimes it's going to happen. So if that's what I pay attention to the most as part of the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. And just going back to just even my child yesterday, I told the same thing. We sat down, we had a conversation about it, and like he made a poor choice, like he honestly thought that the intercom was off and he was just being, a middle schooler, being trying to be funny. you know, and I said the same thing. I'm like, okay, well, this was a mistake. He felt bad, so he was accepting the consequence. He didn't fight it. He owned up to it. He's like, yeah, I said it. I didn't mean to say it to the whole school, but I did say it. So there was none of this like trying to blame anybody, which I was really proud of him for. But then I told him the same thing like you're saying, like, okay, but now if this happens again, to me, that is intentional.
Yeah.
When you say something like that, like, it's a mistake, you learned, you move on, and you're growing from that as long as you're not making the same mistakes over and over, because like you just said, like then you're not truly sorry or you're not really trying. Now, if it's a learning curve, like say on the job or something like that, I think that's a little bit different. But tell me, how do you create that feeling of safety amongst your team that they know that, okay, yes, I am going to make mistakes and I can come to you as, or they can come to you as their supervisor, as their leader, but where that safety comes into place that you're going to be understanding and it's not going to just be automatic, disciplinary action.
Yeah, great question. I would say modeling and communication are the first two words that come to mind when you ask me that question. Modeling in the sense that I'm going to make mistakes. So the running joke is that I'm an expert on this because I mess up all the time. But I'm going to make mistakes, and when I do, I'm not going to shy away from it. I'm going to own up to it, from apologizing to taking accountability for it, to learning and seeing how I'm going to repair it, or at least make sure that it does not continue.
Mhm.
Um, so that's the modeling part, and the communication part is, starting with, and I think of our newer employees, right? Communicating that, look, for starters, you're going to make mistakes, and when you do, okay, don't, because the problem when you are too worried about making mistakes, nobody likes to make mistakes, right? Nobody likes to be wrong. But when you are too worried about it, then that affects your whole decision-making process. And then
Mhm.
that's when you really get in trouble, because then you end up not doing things that you usually would do that could lead to great things, success. So when you get into your head in terms of, well, this is what I think I should do. This is what my gut tells me. This is what my training tells me. This is what the little voice in my head tells me. But I'm afraid that I'm going to be wrong, so I'm not going to. That's when you miss out on all the different possibilities. So you communicate that, um, and then of course you implement it.
Mhm.
Um, so when a mistake happens, you talk about it, you communicate as well, so that there's learning. Um, but then so I guess the third thing would be support, right? You support somebody saying, well, okay, you're wrong. It happened. Let's move on. If you're lucky, it's not a huge repercussion, but even if it is, it's you learn from it and get better.
And yeah, and move on. And that's something too, like, okay, don't dwell on it, learn from it, but okay, but we need to move on. instead of focusing on it. I think that brings a lot of maturity too, with experience and maturity, that people know that they can come and say, hey, I kind of screwed up. I think the leader is responsible for creating that feeling of safety that they know they can, but it's also the maturity on the person that made the mistake. So for our young students that are going out to be these young professionals, you are going to make mistakes in the workplace. You are going to need to ask for help, but I can guarantee that your supervisor or leader, team lead, is going to have so much more respect for you if you just come to them instead of them finding out. And then now you have to explain yourself. So I'm going back to even like with my children when they were little, like, hey, if you spill, grape juice on my white carpet, come tell me right now so that we can hurry up and fix it as soon as possible versus don't pull the rug over it or don't put something over it and let the stain sit in. And now it's going to be worse. And now I have to come and be like, when I have to confront you about your mistake, it almost feels like then it's a bigger deal than it would be if you just owned it and came straight to me immediately with like, hey, this is what happened and what do we do? And also if you come with like a suggested solution as well, not just with the problem, but with a solution.
Yeah. I mean, it really is a huge thing because, and again, it's all connected, but I'll say it again. The worst thing you can do for yourself is not act on something that you really think is the right decision.
Mhm.
And it could ultimately not be. You could be wrong even if you thought very much you were right. But the worst thing you can do for yourself is to hold back, whether it's an action, whether it's like a major decision, like in terms of like applying and choosing a job. For students, it's applying and choosing a college that you're going to go to, or just deciding to be a college student, a major that you decide, a program you decide to apply, right? How many times are we apprehensive, which a certain amount is healthy, right? That you're nervous, you're scared. I don't know if I can do it. I think I can, but I'm nervous about it. That's a normal, healthy emotion to have when you're trying something new, especially. But to ultimately make the decision, I'm not going to do it
Mhm.
solely on fear. Um, like I said, that's the worst thing you can do for yourself. You're cheating yourself out of whether it's a great opportunity or an opportunity to learn. So I use the example of with students. I choose the example of internships.
Uh-huh.
Um, y- you miss out on an opportunity to have a great internship, or you miss out on the opportunity to learn. Okay, this is not what I want to do. And even a crappy internship can be very valuable because now you know. Okay, I mean, check that off as a no. And you won't go down that road again.
Right.
But that's a huge thing is I always tell students, don't, you owe it to yourself to try something that you really want to do, that you're really interested in doing. Um, and if the only reason it's fear that you may not be good at it or you may not succeed, if that's the only reason, it's difficult. You got to fight through it, but you never want to not do it just for that.
Oh, absolutely. I think what we wrap ourselves up in and worry and fear, it's never that's never even going to happen. I think, like the things that we obsess about are so far off of what could actually happen, that it just, yeah, we do end up holding ourselves back. So that's a really good piece of advice, to know that even if it's not, considered successful, I still think that if you think of it from the lens of, okay, well, that just ran its course versus, oh, I failed at that. Like, nope, that just ran its course. And maybe it's a major, maybe like you said, it's an internship. Know what you want to do, what you don't want to do, but it's okay to also change your mind. Like that's not a mistake either. I don't know about you, but like I changed my major 3 times before I found what I loved. And yeah, I had to go a little longer, like a just 1 semester longer, but I don't consider that necessarily a mistake because I think going through with my original plan and I didn't love it, I think that would have been the bigger mistake. So being able just to pivot like that and know that, hey, okay, I tried that, it didn't work out. It's not a failure. I didn't make a mistake. It was something I tried, it didn't work out. Now I'm going to pivot and go this way. I think our students, that's a good message for them to hear.
Yeah, there's so much insight that you gain about yourself when you try something and you end up hitting it. It doesn't happen very often, but even just choosing whatever college you do choose, right? We have students that come here and um, we want them to stay here and we want to help them through it. And we'll always say, don't make the decision on whether you want to stay here or not, just on the notion of fear or whatnot. Um, but if you truly are able to decide, okay, so a small private college campus is not for me. Okay, well, there's nothing wrong with saying, let me pivot and go different option. Um, it there's a lot of knowledge that you gain about yourself of knowing, okay, I thrive in this kind of setting versus not,
Right.
you know. Not that I
Absolutely.
want students transferring out. No, I
No,
want you to
that's not
stay.
the message we're giving. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, hopefully you all know what I mean.
Yeah. No, but also then the other part of this too is just the accepting the consequences. So, again, going back to the way that I parent my children, like if they, have made a bad choice, which again is something else you said this earlier when we first started, like to separate yourself from the mistake, from the decision. It's not like you're a bad person. You made a bad choice. You made a bad decision, but it doesn't define you as a person. You don't become that mistake. You made a mistake. Okay, it's not who you are. So now for whatever it is, say it's at work, you've been written up, and it was something that you've done, you maybe cost the company some money, you lost a client, something like that. Maybe you do get some kind of write-up or something like that, or some type of disciplinary action. The accepting the consequences part, I mean, you have to understand like you're the one that made the choice, whether you did it like purposely trying to get away with something or you tried it and it failed or it was a mistake, but you're still the one responsible. So how you accept those consequences says a lot about who you are as a person and your level of maturity and emotional intelligence. Can you talk a little bit about that, David?
Yeah. Well, and there's different kind of work settings. There's different kind of employers. There's different kind of fields that affect the type of setting you're at. But the way I view specifically write-ups, right? Again, if you are owning up to your mistake, if you're accepting whatever consequence comes your way, if you're communicating, well, this is why I did this. I was wrong.
Mhm.
Even just saying I was wrong is part of the consequence. If you can communicate that, if you can show me that you truly, you know, um, were acting in the best interest, but you messed up, right? Um, Again, everyone's different, but to me, that's my write up for me is after you've made the mistake. First of all, are you accepting, owning up, accepting the consequence? And again, what are you doing afterwards? Where when we start entertaining that, right? Um, but even if you do get write up, like you said, accepting again, it goes back to the growth mindset.
Mhm.
And it's a painful part, right? You got to accept the negative piece. Um, the other part is we say humility is always a good thing, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes you're going to be killing it. You're going to be making all kind of great decisions, and you're going to be on a hot streak. And for 2 weeks, you could not have done anything wrong, right? And then
Mhm.
you make a mistake. And honestly, sometimes that's a good thing, because that again, there's a healthy amount of fear, which makes you more focused, more in tune of what you're doing, whatever decision making you're doing. When you've gone 2 weeks where you could do no wrong, sometimes think about it, we lose a little of that focus. So every once in a while, it's good to kind of be put in your place, so to speak,
Yeah, exactly.
and be reminded, hold on there, you're not perfect. There is no such thing. But accepting consequences is part of that. Um, Along with learning, it's just grounding yourself and going, okay, the things that made me great, right,
Mhm.
sometimes can get lost if I stop focus on them. So a mistake can accepting consequence can bring you back to refocusing on those things initially that make you make the right decisions. Um, but emotional maturity, absolutely. And self-image, confidence, right?
Mhm.
If you have a healthy dose of positive self-image, positive confidence in yourself, accepting consequence may not feel good, but um, it, you're going to be able to do it, right? And it's not going to shock your core. Um, but when you let it kind of translate into who you are versus separating the act, that's when it can kind of trickle down to other things like, viewing yourself and um, having doubt in yourself, which then kind of kicks into every other decision you make in the future. And then it's a whole um, unhealthy cycle. So accepting consequence is important, but also it's a sign of healthy maturity.
Oh, absolutely. That's just the thing. It's that there's going to be consequences, good and bad, for everything that we do. That's just the law of nature, you know. And so when it is something that is uncomfortable or something that, you know, you don't want to necessarily accept, that is where I think that you really grow as a person, because you're not going to grow in your comfort zone. It's in that uncomfortableness that, like you said, the growth mindset to say, okay, I'm humbled because I made this, you know, mistake, and it might be embarrassing. You know, you might not want people to know about it, but if you can just kind of hold your head up high and accept it, I mean, because other people are going to forget about it and drop off probably long before you let yourself off the hook. I know that is like with my youngest, so like he's a very sensitive guy. And you know, he really just like kind of beats himself up, and it's like I've already forgotten about it. Like we need to move on.
Yeah.
But when I can give the consequences and they go, okay, I earned that. I earned that. That shows to me that they are growing, you know, that they are, instead of going, well, this is unfair. It's not really my fault. So and so didn't give me the report, you know, or I wasn't there. I was sick, you know, because I hear this sometimes from my students, like, well, I wasn't in class that day. So I didn't know that we had this assignment. It's like, well, it's your responsibility to get in touch with me if you miss class. And also, like, I post announcements after every class with what we covered. So, you know, being able to accept, like, no, that's on you, it shows a lot of maturity. So I know that when students will come to me and they'll say, you know, oh my gosh, I missed this. I don't know how I missed it. I apologize. I just didn't get to it. And I'm like, okay, great. I will give you an opportunity to turn it in now for half credit, versus someone who just goes, well, I didn't know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Then it's like, well, that's on you, right?
Well, listen, relationships 101, whether it's with a supervisor or a friend. So even in your personal life, a friend, a partner, when you accept consequences. So I'll focus for a second on like actual personal relationships. When you make a mistake and that ends up hurting the other person, again, a friend or a partner, a loved one, a family member, accepting the consequence validates what their pain, their emotions. When you don't accept those kind of consequences, you're basically telling them that their mishap, their pain is not valid, which then causes more trouble, more problems. In a work environment, same thing is if I make a mistake towards somebody else, if I say something that hurt somebody else's feelings, right? That kind of
Mhm.
mistake. And they communicate that to me. Accepting the consequence is knowing that, okay, I know that I've hurt you. Now I've got to repair that relationship. If you refuse to do that, okay, if you ultimately say, well, sorry that you were hurt, but I don't think I did anything wrong, right? Because that's part of it. You're invalidating their emotions, and then you're further hurting that relationship. And even at work, it's all about relationships. That's what it kind
Absolutely.
of comes down to. So on a one-on-one, part of accepting consequences, just validating that person's feelings, even if you didn't mean to do it.
Right. No, that's a
Goes
really
a
good
long
point
way.
to make, because, you know, just as, and I've seen this too, like in relationships or, you know, between people, like, well, you know, you hurt my feelings when you said this. Well, you said this, you know, and it's like, whoa, like, you know, we're talking about how I feel right now. And I feel like that's, you know, when you come at people very defensive like that, you're not accepting your part of the hurt feelings. That's a really good point to make, David. Like you're actually further causing more damage to that relationship. It's an excellent point.
In a work environment, as your supervisor, if you're not willing to even just acknowledge, or part of the consequence is just taking whatever comes your way, if you fight that through, uh, that by itself is telling me you're not really sorry. You're
Mhm.
not really committed to learning from this mistake, which then concerns me, right? Because then I'm thinking, well, it probably is going to happen again.
Yeah.
So it is a sign of maturity, but it also helps with the process. Sometimes the consequences become less severe by owning up and accepting whatever comes your way, being ready to do that. Like you
Mhm.
said, if your student tells you, I am so sorry, I forgot, I don't know how it happened, they're more likely to get a lesser consequence than if they're like, well, you didn't assign, you didn't post it enough, right?
Right.
That's going to make you go, okay, well, whatever sympathy I had
It's
for you, whatever little leeway I was considering, it ain't going to happen now. Um, that's again, relationship 101. And if you are aware of that, it helps as a child to a parent, especially younger children. Listen, accept your mistake and own up to it, and it actually might help you with the punishment versus fighting it all the way. Then you're going to get the full force.
exactly. You get the full force, yeah, because I give the consequence, and then depending on how they handle it, if they go, I earned that, that's on me, my bad, or whatever. And I let them sit with it for a minute, but then I usually will come back to them and be like, I'm so impressed with how you handled it. You didn't fight it, you owned it, it was your responsibility. So then I'll take back half of it. So like say if they lost their iPad for a week, then you only have to lose it for 3.5 days. So I give them an opportunity to kind of earn it back, but with the understanding too, like if we make the same mistake down the line, you're going to lose your iPad now for 2 weeks because I'll know now that you know better and you still chose it. So but just the way that you handle it. So like same with students when they're like, I didn't turn it in. No, you didn't. And so I have to take the F on that. Yes, you do. Okay. But then the respect goes up and it shows that, hey, you know that you are responsible for your own actions and that, hey, whether you do it or don't do it, you have to own it. And I think that's the same with classes, like you said, in relationships and like at work. So as we kind of get towards the end of this, David, did you have any like last minute like advice or kind of words of wisdom that you can impart on them as they kind of explore this topic of embracing their mistakes and accepting the consequences?
Yeah. I guess I would say in any aspect of your life, especially as you go into careers, um, you cannot reach it's all about reaching your full potential is kind of what I would mean by being great, right? Um, you can't do that without taking risks. And you can't take risks without understanding that sometimes you're going to make mistakes. And then again, going into how you view that. Um, it just, you can't have one without the other. But, when you take risks, you have the opportunity for so many great things, but it comes in a bundle. You can't have it separated. So don't hesitate to take those chances that you think are worth it, knowing that the benefit could be great and worth if indeed it's not, if you're not successful. So that's what I would say.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I love this topic. It's applicable across every aspect of our life. So I really think this is a great last call for the semester to talk about this as we, let them go and they impart on their next event parts of their adventure. But thank you everyone for joining us. If you are getting your attendance counted, please make sure you either scan the QR code on the screen or I also put the URL in the chat pod if you wanted to click on it that way if you've logged in on your phone. If you have any questions or want any more information about this topic, you can reach out to me or to David, who's over in the Counseling Center. But thank you so much for spending your morning with us, everybody. I hope you learned something and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, David. Bye.